She was running for her life, pregnant, alone, abandoned in a desert with no water, no direction, and no hope. And then God spoke her name, not the name of a prophet, not the name of a queen, but the name of a servant no one cared about. And what he said next changed everything. Imagine a desert, not the perfect golden dunes you see in movies, but the real desert, the harsh one, hot, silent, empty. Now imagine walking through it, alone, running from everything, carrying a weight no one can see, and believing, truly believing, that God isn't watching. This is the story of a woman who thought she was invisible, but on that day, in the middle of her pain, she heard the impossible. God called her by name. Her name was Hagar. She was Egyptian, a servant, a foreigner in a land that wasn't hers. Hagar didn't choose to be part of this story. She was pushed into it. You see, Sarah, Abraham's wife, couldn't have children. And in that culture, in that time, a woman without a child carried a kind of invisible shame. So Sarah made a decision. She gave Hagar to Abraham, not as a wife, as a solution. Hagar had no voice in this, no choice. She became a vessel for someone else's dream, and when she got pregnant, everything shifted. The tension between Sarah and Hagar became unbearable. What started as duty became resentment. What should have been hope became hostility. Sarah treated her harshly. The mistreatment was real, the pain was crushing, and Hagar, pregnant and vulnerable, reached a breaking point. So she did what many of us do when the pain becomes too much. She ran. She fled into the wilderness, away from everything she knew, away from the cruelty, away from the impossible situation. There was no plan, no destination, just the desperate, urgent need to escape. Hagar fled into the wilderness, and here's where the story becomes ours, because every desert begins the same way. Not with sand, but with a feeling, the feeling that no one sees you, that no one cares, that you don't matter. Maybe you know what that feels like. Maybe you've been there, in your own wilderness, your own place of isolation. Not a physical desert, but an emotional one, a spiritual one. It's the desert of burnout, where you've given everything and have nothing left. The desert of betrayal, where someone you trusted broke you. The desert of invisibility, where you feel overlooked, forgotten, erased. The desert of anxiety, where every step forward feels impossible. Hagar was in that place. She was pregnant, alone, exhausted. She had been used, mistreated, cast aside. And in that moment she believed something that many of us have believed too. She believed she was completely, utterly alone. Think about that for a moment. She wasn't just physically alone in a desert. She felt spiritually abandoned, emotionally forgotten. She had fled from pain, but she was running toward nothing. No future, no hope, just emptiness. And maybe that's where you are right now. Maybe you've been running too. Running from something that hurt you. Running from someone who broke you. Running from expectations you couldn't meet. Running from a version of yourself you can't recognize anymore. You might feel like Hagar felt, like you're in a place where no one knows your name, where no one sees your struggle, where God himself has turned away. But here's where everything changes. Here's where the story shifts from despair to something completely unexpected, something revolutionary. The text says this: "The angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness." Read that slowly. The angel of the Lord found her. She wasn't looking for God. She didn't have the strength to seek him. She didn't even know if he cared. But God was looking for her. God went into the wilderness to find her. This is the heart of the story. This is what makes it different from every other narrative of abandonment and pain. Hagar didn't stumble upon God by accident. God pursued her. God sought her out. God entered her desert. And when he found her, he didn't lecture her. He didn't condemn her for running. He didn't remind her of her place as a servant. He did something far more powerful. He spoke to her. He asked her a question. "Hagar, servant of Sarah, where have you come from and where are you going?" Think about that question. It's not just practical. It's deeply spiritual. It's an invitation to reflect, to pause, to be seen. God already knew where she came from. He knew the pain, the rejection, the mistreatment. He knew everything, but he asked anyway, because sometimes the most healing thing isn't a solution. It's someone asking with genuine care what you've been through. Where have you come from? What has brought you to this place of desperation? What pain are you carrying? What hurt have you endured? And then the second part, where are you going? What's next? What are you hoping for? What do you see ahead? Hagar answered honestly. She said, I'm running away from my mistress Sarah. She didn't pretend. She didn't spiritualize it. She told the truth. I'm running because it hurts too much to stay. And here's what's stunning. God didn't shame her for that. He didn't tell her she was weak or faithless. Instead, he gave her something far greater than an escape plan. He gave her his presence. He gave her a promise. He gave her dignity. The angel told her, go back to your mistress and submit to her. But know this, I will surely multiply your offspring so that they cannot be counted for multitude. You are with child and shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has listened to your affliction. Let's break this down. God didn't remove Hagar from the hard situation. He didn't instantly fix everything, but he did three revolutionary things. First, he saw her, really saw her. In a world where she was invisible, disposable, God looked directly at her and acknowledged her pain. Second, he listened to her. The name Ishmael literally means God hears. Her suffering wasn't ignored. Her cries weren't dismissed. God heard every word, every sob, every silent scream. Third, he gave her a future. He promised her a lineage. He told her that her son would matter, that her story wouldn't end in the desert, that she was part of something bigger. But here's the most powerful moment of all. After this encounter, Hagar did something no one else in Scripture had done before. She gave God a name. She called him El Roi, the God who sees me. She said, have I really seen God and remained alive after seeing him? She was awestruck, undone, transformed. Because in that moment, she realized something that changed everything. She wasn't invisible. She had never been invisible. God had been watching all along. El Roi, the God who sees. Let that sink in for a moment. In a world that overlooks, ignores, and forgets, there is a God who sees, who notices, who pays attention. Hagar didn't name God based on what he did for her. She named him based on what she experienced in his presence. She felt seen, and that alone was enough to give her the strength to go back. I wonder if you need to hear that today, that you are seen, not just glanced at, not just acknowledged in passing, but truly, deeply, fully seen. God sees you in the middle of your burnout, when you're running on empty and no one notices how hard you're trying. God sees you in your loneliness, when you scroll through pictures of everyone else's happiness and feel more alone than ever. God sees you in your grief, when the world has moved on, but your heart is still broken. God sees you in your shame, in the parts of your story you've never told anyone, in the mistakes you can't undo. He sees you in the desert, in the place you thought was too far, too hidden, too forgotten. He sees you there, and he calls you by name. That's what Hagar experienced. Not a distant, impersonal deity, but a God who knew her name, who knew her story, who cared enough to meet her in her pain. And this is where the story becomes profoundly personal, because if God saw Hagar, a servant with no status, no power, no voice, then he sees you too. If he pursued her into the wilderness, then he's pursuing you. If he listened to her affliction, then he's listening to yours. You might feel forgotten, but you're not. You might feel invisible, but you're not. You might feel like your story doesn't matter, but it does, because the God who sees is watching, and he's been watching all along. Now here's the tension. God told Hagar to go back, to return to the place of pain, and that's hard. That doesn't feel like deliverance. It doesn't feel like rescue. It feels like being sent back into the fire. But here's the difference. She wasn't going back alone. She wasn't going back without a promise. She wasn't going back unchanged. She was going back as someone who had encountered the living God, someone who had been seen, someone who had been given a future. And sometimes that's what faith looks like. Not an immediate escape from difficulty, not a miraculous removal of every hardship, but the strength to endure because you know you're not alone, because you've met the God who sees. Hagar went back, and she carried that encounter with her. She carried the promise. She carried the name, El Roi, the God who sees me, and that changed everything. Let's be honest. This part of Hagar's story is uncomfortable for us. We want the Disney ending. We want God to swoop in, remove Sarah from the picture, give Hagar a mansion, and make everything perfect. We want instant relief, immediate resolution, total transformation. But that's not what happened. God didn't remove Hagar from the hard situation. He equipped her to face it. And that's often how God works, not by changing our circumstances overnight, but by changing us in the middle of them. I know that's hard to hear, especially if you're in pain right now, especially if you've been praying for relief and it hasn't come, especially if you're exhausted and desperate for something, anything, to change. But maybe the miracle isn't always the removal of the desert. Maybe sometimes the miracle is the presence of God in the desert, the strength to take the next step, the hope that keeps you breathing, the promise that your story isn't over. Hagar didn't get an easy life. Her story continued to be complicated. She would face more hardship, more rejection, more pain. But she had something now that she didn't have before. She had an encounter with the God who sees. And that encounter sustained her. You might be wondering, is that enough? Is it enough to know that God sees me if nothing changes? Is it enough to have a promise if I'm still in pain? And here's the answer. It has to be. Because sometimes the knowing is all we have. The knowing that we're not forgotten. The knowing that our pain isn't invisible. The knowing that God hasn't abandoned us, even when it feels like He has. Faith isn't always about getting what we want. Sometimes faith is about trusting God in the waiting, in the uncertainty, in the middle of the story when the ending isn't clear yet. Hagar trusted. She went back, and her son Ishmael was born. The promise came true. God heard, God saw, God remembered, and He'll do the same for you. Maybe not in the way you expect, maybe not on your timeline, but He will. Because the God who saw Hagar is the same God who sees you. Now let's talk about what this means for us, for you, for your life, for your wilderness. Maybe you're in your own desert right now. Maybe you've been running. Maybe you've been hiding. Maybe you feel like Hagar felt, alone and unseen. Here's what I want you to know. God is looking for you, right now. In the middle of your pain, in the middle of your confusion, in the middle of your wilderness. He's not waiting for you to find Him. He's pursuing you, and He wants to ask you the same question He asked Hagar. Where have you come from? What pain are you carrying? What has brought you to this breaking point? He's not asking because He doesn't know. He's asking because He wants you to know that He cares, that your story matters, that your pain is real and valid and seen. So take a moment. Right now, wherever you are, whatever you're going through, pause, breathe, and acknowledge it. Name it. Tell God where you've come from, what you're running from, what hurts. You don't have to clean it up. You don't have to make it sound spiritual. Just be honest, like Hagar was honest. I'm running. I'm hurt. I can't do this anymore. And then listen, because God isn't silent. He speaks. Maybe not audibly, maybe not dramatically, but He speaks through His word, through His presence, through the still, small voice that whispers in your soul. He's saying, I see you, I hear you, I know you by name, and I haven't forgotten you. You might not get the answer you want. You might not get the immediate relief you're praying for, but you will get something better. You'll get the presence of the God who sees, and that presence is enough. It has to be enough. Because it's everything. Hagar named God El Roi, the God who sees me, and you can too. You can say it out loud. You can whisper it in your heart. El Roi, you see me, You know me, you haven't abandoned me, and when you do, something shifts. Not necessarily in your circumstances, but in your spirit, in your perspective, in your hope, because you remember that you're not alone, that you've never been alone, that the God of the universe knows your name and cares about your story. So go back, not to the pain, but through it, with God, with the promise, with the certainty that you are seen, heard, and known, and trust that the God who found Hagar in the wilderness will sustain you in yours. So here's where we end, not with a neat bow, not with all the answers, but with a truth that's been true since the beginning of time. God sees, God hears, God knows your name, and that changes everything. Hagar thought she was alone. She thought she was invisible. She thought God had forgotten her, but she was wrong. And if you think the same thing about your life right now, you're wrong too. You are not invisible. You are not forgotten. You are not too far gone. You are not beyond reach. The God who found Hagar in the desert is the same God who finds you wherever you are. He calls you by name. He knows your story. He sees your pain, and He's with you right now, in this moment, in this struggle, in this season of your life. So take a deep breath. Let that truth settle into your soul. You are seen, you are known, you are loved by the God who never stops looking, by the God who never stops caring, by El Roi, the God who sees. If you felt alone, you're not. If you felt forgotten, you haven't been. If you felt invisible, open your eyes, because God is standing right there in your wilderness, calling your name. And just like He did with Hagar, He's giving you a promise. Your story isn't over. Your pain isn't the end. There's more ahead, more hope, more purpose, more life. So pause here, reflect, pray, talk to the God who sees you. Tell Him what you need to tell Him, and then listen, because He's speaking. He's always speaking to you by name, El Roi, the God who sees. May you know Him today. May you feel His presence. May you hear Him call your name. And may you walk forward, not alone, but with the certainty that you are seen, heard, and deeply, eternally loved.